Hey, hello, and welcome to the Event Marketers Toolbox. Welcome, everybody. I'm Chris Dunn. I'm with Blue Hive Exhibits, and we're super happy to have you here. I've got some friends with me, one that you'll recognize right off because she's been a co-host for almost a whole year, and her name is Dana Esposito. She is our EVP of Creative and Strategy, and we've got a friend as well. So, Dana, who are you? Give a little bit more background and then kick it over to Stephanie. Let her give a little explanation on who she is.
Sure. So I've been in the industry 30 years. Exhibit designer is my foundation, but also creative director, creative leadership, corporate strategy, and also client advocate. And also do a lot of things with the EDPA to protect the future of our industry, including future workforce, basically students and other people coming into our industry, which is pretty exciting. And, that's the maternal side of me that I don't have at home. But no, I work.
You have a fur baby.
I do have a fur baby. But I work with Chris at Blue Hive, and I'm very excited to talk to Stephanie today. So, Stephanie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're listening to this, or good evening if you're in Europe. My name is Stephanie Selesnick. I'm president of International Trade Information. I am second generation in the trade show business. So what I do is I help internationalize trade shows is my core business. And then I blog for Exhibition World magazine and have blogged for several other publications in the past. I've been in the industry 30 plus years. I worked my first trade show when I was 10, my first international show when I was 14. And I put on about 75 to 100,000 miles a year going around the world, either teaching about exhibitions, being at exhibitions, selling exhibitions, and generally being a troublemaker at large. So it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. You would just learn to live with jet lag.
And you were telling us your mom is actually the work person, you're second generation, but your mom was kind of a glass ceiling person, right? Like, that's awesome.
She was a publisher and in the apparel industry, not for clothing, for the machinery side. And her largest competitor had a publication and a very large trade show in Atlanta at the time for many years. And she figured if he could do it, it couldn't be that hard. He wasn't that smart in her head. And so she just decided to do a show. And she ended up with a really great account manager from Greyhound Exhibitions, which then morphed into GES.
Uh-oh.
Oh boy, this is a new one.
This is new. Now it's you and me. No one's going to want to. Exactly. No one cares what you see with me.
Sorry. You know, when you live in a high rise, things happen.
It's okay.
And so, and then she launched her first trade show in Mexico. She went down with IAEE on a trade mission, fell in love with Mexico, and ended up deciding to do her show in Mexico and start a Mexican publication for the apparel industry at the time. This was long before NAFTA. There were no trade shows. Absolutely no, there were no trade shows really. There were no venues. There was one little venue. We ended up doing the first apparel, the first show in Mexico was done in the Camino Real Hotel parking lot in Mexico City. There was no venue. And now there's several, of course. And they brought in generators. And when the wind blew the wrong way, it was not good. But people were still interested. You know, if you think about what we do, we're the second oldest profession, right? The marketplace.
That's right.
We are the marketplace.
Yeah.
So that was, I was 14 at the time when we did our first show in Mexico. So you can say, and all of my siblings also, when you were 10, you got to stay in the hotel and then you would be in charge of putting out the publications. One year, I guess the staff went out and got a little buzz the night before and everybody was late to work. And at the time we had to type in registration. And so I was a kid typing registration badges until the staff showed up hungover. Not that anybody in this industry has ever done that.
No, never happened before. First time for everything, right? We have a lively group in the comments today. I love to see it. We've got a bunch of folks checking in here. So, hey, Erica, how are you? Nice to see you. She also had an early start. She said she started in the events industry at 14, so 10 did beat her. We've got Kate. So, Kate Howley, if you can hear us, we have in fact started because we're live. And Zadia, so our super listener from New Jersey. Hey, Zadia, how's it going, girl? Nice and sunny in my background here. Oh, it's over there, just like your smiley sun face. So before we jump into the meat and potatoes, this is a live show. So we'd love the comments. Keep them coming. If you've got a good question you want to kind of put in there, we'll try to work it into our commentary. We do have a little bit of an agenda, but you guys know how it is. We kind of roll with it. We keep it loose, and we're here to just have a really great organic conversation, and hopefully turn over some stones. And Stephanie has a lens of somebody who travels the world and goes to events all over the place. And we just lost Dana. Look at this. This is going to be an interesting day. Hey, Dana, how are you? Oh my God, where'd you go? Surprise! All right. At some point, I'll disappear. I guess. I think it's just a thing. It's Restream's having a day. All right. So let me get into our sponsors, right? Because without our sponsors, we don't have a show, and then we wouldn't have all this great, wonderful conversations and content that we create here. So I work for Blue Hive. Dana works for Blue Hive. So Blue Hive, a year and a half ago, said, you know what, Chris, you've been banging this drum for a while. We do want to go ahead and support this idea of having a show. What's it going to be about? And we're like, well, let's have conversations with event people who talk about things that other event people want to talk about and learn from. So it was a fairly simple premise. We're trying to build a community here of people from really all sides of the event forum, as it were, who can kind of, lift each other up, help each other out, make recommendations, expose them to new ideas that maybe they don't get to see on a regular basis. I know when I'm here in my office working at my desk, my vision is so limited. And when you go out to the trade show floor, whether it be here in the US or overseas or wherever, right, it opens up everything, because you're like, oh wow, like there's things happening that I was not even thinking about. So that's super cool. So anyways, Blue Hive has given us the ability to do this, but here's the God's honest truth. I tried to do it along with an original partner, the podcast, the live show, and get it off the ground, and failed miserably. Like I couldn't get all of the things done, because even though it's not rocket science, but it's just like, how do you do a full-time job and try to do this and understand and learn the business all at once? And our fortunes changed when we partnered with the agency Fist Bump, who is actually running the show right now. So they do all the heavy lifting, and they allow a company like Blue Hive to kind of come on, have the conversations. We're responsible for obviously showing up and participating, but they do the heavy lift. They help us kind of curate all that content, and then that helps us get found, right? So if you're an organization out there and you're thinking about how do we use a medium like this, Fist Bump is absolutely a great resource to have. So now that we got that out of the way, I'm going to kick it back to Dana and Stephanie, and they're going to start us off with a little talk about like what you guys came for, right? What are you seeing on the floor, like everywhere, all over the world?
Yeah. So Stephanie, specifically like CES, World of Concrete, or some of the other larger shows you've been to more recently, what are you seeing? Like, if I'm thinking from the creative side, when people want to know like what's some of the more current trends out there on the show hall floor.
Yeah, one of the trends that I started seeing last year at CES, and then was really multiplied, was this idea of course, everybody goes to a trade show to see what's new. Number one reason, all over the world. Number two is to network, but number one is still to see what's new. And Eureka Park is a prime example of that. It is the busiest part of CES. There's 1,500 companies. There are country pavilions. There are all different kinds of organizations. But what I thought was interesting was like Canon, LG, and some of the larger exhibitors at CES have their own proprietary pavilions in Eureka Park with startups that they have partnered with. Samsung, for example, has a couple of different ways. They have employees who have come to them with ideas and self-develop. Some of those companies actually get launched and remain in the Samsung family, but are separately owned. Some are entrepreneurs who come in. So it's all very interesting, but what they're doing is supplying a place for R&D. Their R&D is now innovation, and they're bringing in new companies because in some ways it's cheaper and less expensive to buy into a new company, help them with the things that they need to launch and own part of the company, and then either buy it outright or allow it to go on their own and still stay friendly. So I've started to really see that in different places, and it's great. So instead of just country pavilions, the other thing were universities with alumni in their booths who have started new products and services. So it's very interesting. It really still is pretty an interesting idea. And I think for organizers especially, start looking at your big exhibitors and say, hey, are you doing this with any companies? Why don't we put you in a pavilion? So if they've maxed out on their budget, what a great way to bring them in a whole new light. And, bring in some extra revenue at the same time while providing, it's a win-win. And I think that's how we really have to create that's how our relationships need to be. We need to thank people that pay our salaries, that pay our mortgages. They're not the enemy. And I think too often at trade shows, we see an adversarial relationship where, maybe younger people and middle management and sometimes upper management think that, they're just always going to be in our show. Nothing is in stone. And if anything has taught us since COVID, really, no, we have to reprove ourselves year in and year out on the value of what it is we do and be accommodating and say thank you.
Yeah. I like that idea of the little guys getting together and supporting. It's a nice sense of community, and you never know what something starts off small, can really go. They can go anywhere.
Right.
And then something else that we would do with our shows in Mexico for many years. My mom was the first North American to do shows in Mexico long before NAFTA. So as I mentioned, so what we would do is U.S. companies would come in to the shows. They would find distributors, right? Because they would need distributors to get out there. And then what we would do is we would say, okay, great. Why don't you get some subsidies from the companies that you're showing and take a bigger booth? Then they can send down one rep to sell the product, be the subject matter expert. And they would get bigger stands. They would get bigger booths. So it's another way to do things. So if you're bringing in international people, say to your U.S. show, and they're finding distributors here, right?
Yep.
Why not talk to the distributors about co-locating, and getting some buy-in from the lines that they represent from overseas and getting bigger space with more stuff going on.
Yeah.
Another thing that we see is, pre-sale equipment. If you've got equipment, who doesn't want to kick the tires? It's more interesting. We've got ConExpo, coming to town. And I mean, the machinery is humongous. Same thing at World of Concrete. People want to kick the tires. Well, it can be pretty expensive, depending on the city, to get your stuff in. Well, why not pre-sell it, split the shipping costs? So the manufacturer pays for it to go overseas or to show site, and then the buyer picks it up and transports it away.
Yeah,
Plus,
we've had some time to do that. Yeah, so especially with large equipment or large product in general. I mean, that is such a benefit on both sides that it's something great to take advantage of.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We see that a lot at IMTS with some of the large equipment, especially coming over from Germany. There's a lot of German manufacturers that are building these, really intricate CNC cutting machines, material removal and all of that stuff. And that's exactly what they'll do, right? Because why bother sending it over if we certainly don't want to send it back? So everybody wins in something like that.
It really does. And especially the attendees win because they get to see the equipment and they really get to see it. Absolutely.
Stephanie, what have you seen? I mean, each show is a little bit different, and some shows like CES, they don't have to sort of be as creative, coming up with different ways to be interactive with their audience, because oftentimes their products tend to be interactive all of their own volition. But what have you seen? Maybe some trends or just things that are different in the way of people trying to get attendees into their space, or to help them learn something, or communicate to them, or draw them in. That's and I mean, like, beyond some of like a prize wheel, some of the old school, and I hate to say gimmicky because I know sometimes that's not a good word, but just what have you seen that's maybe just a little bit more unusual or surprised you?
I've seen, and World of Concrete, by the way, is one of my absolute favorite shows in the entire world. It is just the biggest celebration of community. People get married there. They sell swag. They have trucks with swag. It's unbelievable. They have competitions and that are sponsored. They have a bricklaying competition that I think the final package prize. They do regional events to bring people in. People show up with their T-shirts on to support their teams. $250,000 in prizes.
Wow.
Oh my God, life-changing, right?
Yeah.
Competition. Who knew? All kinds of competitions. So I'm going to take a couple of examples from there. They have an outside area, and some of the exhibitors hold competitions where they have people doing things with the equipment, using it. Everybody wants to get their hands on it. If you have an industrial show, take advantage of it. Use that. Now, on the other side of the coin, we've got shows like Money 2020, Health, InsurTech Connect, which are on a completely different model. My friend Julia Solaris from Bold Push talks about the high street model of show organization, where you have different areas, pavilions, you have an anchor, you have an activation of some kind, and then you have smaller kiosks around, and then you have one-on-one meetings. Those are hugely popular. You also have a stage per area. So these are all different areas and ways to get things, accomplished. Another one is education in the booth. If you've got a 20 by 20, if you've got a 36-meter square booth, essentially the same size, couple inches difference. But if you have one of those, you can make a small area. Don't do infomercials. Give real, find out what is the pain point from your clients, right?
Right.
Let's work with our exhibitors to do the education on the show floor, because you see it everywhere. Even at IMAX, you see some really good education happening. I mean, they do a ton of education. They do like 150 sessions a year, per show in Vegas. I think that was the latest number. So, but other exhibitors, some of the exhibitors do their own as well. They bring in speakers, they sponsor things. So think about it from the perspective of what's in it for me. What is going to enrich the attendee experience? What's going to make them want to stop in that 2 seconds that they have to walk by? Saying we solve problems is useless. You've got to be specific. And that's something that as organizers, we have to teach our clients how to do. And, I mean, right, for you guys, as exhibits, right, as an exhibit house, the more successful your clients are at a show, the more money they're going to have to spend, the more they're going to want to do, the bigger the spend. It's a win-win situation. So it behooves all of us in the industry to help our clients be better. Also, on the other hand, with attendees, we have to help them. If you've never been to a trade show before, it can be a very scary experience. You're there's thousands of people. Where do I go? What do I do? And so for organizers, we really need to think about, how are we going to do that? How are we going to make that happen? So again, it's about, what's in it for me from everybody's perspective, not the organizers.
Yeah.
Stephanie, and this is, you could go in a whole bunch of different directions, but your lens, and I've been to a lot of shows, in North America, let's say, fewer in Europe, and I've never actually been over to, to APAC or down under or South America. Like and paint, and I'm asking you to kind of paint with a pretty broad brush, but when you think about North American shows, and then you think about some of the things that they do internationally, maybe in the Middle East, right? That's things in Dubai and so forth are really picking up. They're getting very popular. What are some things that us as North American exhibitors who might want to go overseas and exhibit, what are some of the things that we need to think about? Like, how are things different? And how do we get the ROI?
You need to understand the culture, right? You need to understand the culture. You need to understand, how does the sales process work in that country? Because every country is different. Are you selling direct? Do you need to find distribution? How are you doing it? How do you hand over a business card? Do you have food and alcohol in the stand? A lot of places do. They don't use pipe and drape anywhere. There are no display guidelines and rules and regulations. There is no drayage. Your freight forwarder is the one who does it. They bring in the freight. So you don't have any of the same things. So on the other side of the coin, when you have internationals coming to your show, it's a completely different experience. And they are flabbergasted as to what we do.
At the pricing?
Right? They are because we just run shows differently. The numbers. So when you're in APAC and you're in the Middle East, the sheer numbers of people at the shows will blow your mind. Here, what we have 148,000 came to the last CES, and they do actually audit. They're one of the few in the United States that do. So they actually do have a third-party auditing system that they've done for at least the last 10 or 15 years. They went to it very early on, and I'm in favor of it. I think let's call a spade a spade. If you have 2,000 people, it's a lot different look than 6,000, than 10,000. Don't mind. People can see it on the show floor. But besides that, I think you need to really concentrate on what is the sales process. If you're looking for distribution, put a sign out. Have somebody in your booth who speaks the language if you do not. We always assume somebody's going to speak English. They may not. It's their country. They don't have to.
Right.
So you want to make sure and take advantage of that. Do you need a AAA certified interpreter? No. Should you make a list of the vocabulary that whoever's going to be in your booth doing the interpreting, not translating, interpreting. Translation is word for word. It doesn't make sense. Interpreting is taking the meaning and intent and translating it from that way. So there is a difference, and especially if you're doing anything in multiple languages, you want to have somebody who's a native speaker look at it first before you ever publish it anywhere. So, be aware of the selling process is different. Internationally, people want to get to know you. They want to know about your business. They want to know about the history of the business. They want to know about the management of the business. They want to know that you're serious about staying, even when things get rough. You need to understand about arbitrage. You need to understand about currencies. And so these are things that are really, really important. So I think that we have to, be aware of that stuff. In China, for example, you will see 5 million people behind the reg counter. You don't need 5 million people, but they have one person who has one job, the next job, the next job, the next job. You will see thousands of people on the show floor. One of our clients I represent and work with, the Shanghai New International Expo Center. It's the only Western-owned and run venue in China. And it's with 3 German messes in partnership with the people who built the Shanghai Tower. It's 3 million square feet, 2 million plus of halls and some outside temporary buildings that have air conditioning, so they're not that temporary. And then and it's built in a triangle. And one of the shows we have, Pet Fair Asia, 500,000 people.
Wow.
Right? What they do is that they brought this in, and this is another trend we're starting to see in a lot of places. It's a 5-day show, which you would hope with something that huge, and it takes over the entire venue. It's really 300,000 square meters, so over 3 million. It's a big show, and they have 2.5 days of trade, where you have to be trade to get in. And what they do is in some of the buildings, they just have people interested in trade. Those buildings close, and then it's open to the public. And they get a gate. And so we're seeing a lot of that going on around the world, where you're having B2B becomes B2C, and the line is being
interesting.
And a lot of industries are being impacted by online sales. Your Amazons, your Alibabas, whoever it is. I'm seeing organizers partnering with them, because you can go onto Amazon and I'm looking for a specific brand. That's how they're selling into their shows now. That's how they're differentiating themselves. Yes, we're available on all the line, and we're available in brick and mortar. What a great thing for exhibitors. It's a different way of looking at it, and it's something that we have to start presenting, especially for retail shows that are having issues. And for clients, yours, and everybody else that's out there, what can we do to partner and make them stand out, as well as online, which is a different way of thinking about things completely.
I'm going to try to jump in here. There's a ton of great networking and questions happening here in the chat, which is awesome. But
Really?
I'm looking at
they're having a whole other thing going on.
And I kind of don't know what's directed at us and what's directed at other people. But
they're talking to each other too, which is pretty cute.
Yeah. So Mark Leduc, who was a guest last week, our last show that we had 2 weeks ago, asked a question about what do you think about integrated job fairs on the exhibit floor, And I think that ties into, it has a similarity to what you were talking about, where there's a B2B component and which becomes a B2C component, which, by the way, I love that, because we think about, you got a 3-day show. Like we did NRF, it was a month ago, it was in New York. The amount of effort, and this is a great show, right? It's fairly sizable. It's not 500,000 people by any means. Yeah, I don't know, 40, 50,000 attendees, whatever. It's a lot. But there's so much effort, there's so much money spent to get all the stuff there and to do the setup and all the things that need, like, what if there were a way to extend the show another couple of days? It doesn't take any more money to basically make all that stuff happen. But if you can add value, figure out different ways to bring in different attendees who maybe need different things. But I like the thinking around that, because it's becoming so expensive to do these events. Like we have to figure out how to deliver the value, the ROI to the exhibiting companies who are ponying up all the dollars to make it worthwhile, so that they continue to do that, right? So getting creative around, like, how do we rethink the trade show floor? How do we think about different ways to bring in crowds, or whatever those things are? I think the job fair thing plays in nicely. I know one of our veterinarian clients does that as well, and they are 2 separate halls, but it's like, we got all these people here already. A lot of them are looking for opportunities. Roll it all together.
I worked on
Do some of the auto shows do that?
Sorry?
Do some of the auto shows do that? They're open just for the trade, but then they open one day for public.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
The mobility auto show in LA does it. Detroit does it. I'm not sure about Chicago, but yeah, they do it well. So let's go back to job fairs for a second, because you just threw a whole lot at me, Chris. So yes, one word, yes. You have to put it somewhere separate, because people, if they're looking for jobs, they don't want their bosses to know, right?
Good point.
They're looking for jobs. They don't want their bosses to know. So you have to create a different safe space for those to happen. If you're an association, or even if you're for profit, if your industry is really needing people, figure it out and don't try to make a profit. Don't make this a line, just look at it as a loss leader, because you're helping your industry. You're helping the future of your industry, and you're helping everybody else. If you want to charge a nominal sum, not for the people going to look for the jobs, but for the people who are looking to employ new people, definitely I would say go for it. There was years ago, I worked on a show, and it was for animators. And some of the biggest video companies in the country would actually, part of what they did is they would look at the books and do interviews and book interviews and spend the whole show looking at nothing but artist portfolios and hire based on that. So how can you do that? And I think it's a service to your industry. If your exhibition is serving an industry, then serve it. Make it accessible. A lot of shows here and other places make students come the last day, which is typically the quietest. So they bring the students through, do job fairs. You can do all of those things on the last day of the show. You don't necessarily have to, when things quiet down, do it in the afternoon. But make sure that you've got it set up ahead of time and make it easy. Do a little bit of vetting, because you want to make sure you don't just have looky-loos coming in, right? But it's definitely a way to make that happen. So I think it's good for the industry, and it doesn't have to be that hard.
Right. She's speaking your love language there, Dana. I know. So Dana is really involved with the future workforce through EDPA, and she also kind of does mentorship with a lot of design students. And I know at Exhibitor Live, which is coming up in about 6 weeks or so, and actually we're going to have the owner of that show on in a couple of weeks, Mark Johnson. So Dana, tell us a little bit about. So you can speak personally to how you guys at the EDPA have figured out a lot of the things that Stephanie has just mentioned. How are you guys using that as a benefit for all sides of the industry?
So with the EDPA, the Experiential Designers and Producers Association, basically member companies, whether you're someone like Blue Hive or you're a system provider like Octonome or B Matrix or Aluvision or AMAG, we all come together and we support the industry. So one of those things is at Exhibitor Live, there are some companies like Octonorm that sponsor a booth that is specifically for students. And the students that get to use this exhibit are from two long-term colleges that we have a relationship with, BSU up in Minnesota and FIT in New York City. They have been cultivating exhibit designers over the years that have been coming into our workforce, but also graphic designers. They're starting to do digital content creators, even some project managers, account managers. Some BSU grads have gone on to become salespeople. There are some that are now company owners. Just because maybe they start in design doesn't mean they stay in design, right? Everyone's brains and passion are very different. But that's a perfect example how we do use that show for developing future workforce, making connections. And there are a lot of people in the industry involved in different committees in EDPA who make all that happen, who donate time to different things. It may be their time, maybe their treasure, maybe their talent. And then that show, as you guys both know, is all about education and CTSM as well. And so we're always trying to offer that audience really good, benefits beyond just networking. We want them to feel very supported, whether they're new to the industry or veterans getting additional knowledge.
CES does something, and I'm going to correct you. They work so hard on killing the sacred cows and how can we be better and how can we bring in more, and they do it. That is something that they consciously do. Yeah. How can we make the experience better? So, for example, they had an entire creative, and they've done this the last several years. They have a creator area. NAB does the same thing. They've got a creator area with a focus on creators. How can you be better at it? What is the new technology that's out there? How can we do these things? And again, it's about using using what we have to grow the business, grow the industry. So, in Europe, education is kind of a secondary thing, and in Asia, not always. I don't want to get yelled at by anybody, but what we do in the U.S. primarily, because we're over 65% of the trade shows here are association owned. So there is that kickback. So we've always had a tradition here of providing education along with paid and free, of providing education on the show floor or elsewhere, a day before, a day after, whatever it may be. There's a thirst for knowledge that you can't get. And so we're starting to see that trend go. But there's a term for it called convex, convention, and expo, right? But for us, it's a normal thing for a trade show to have education, right? It's a normal part of what we do, right. Whether it's for CEUs or it's just, making the industry grow. So we will see, you do see a lot of paid, which is great, but there's also free education on the show floor. Yeah. So I think that's something to be aware of. One thing though, if you can do it on Zoom, don't do it in the room. Just done. If you're offering education, make it workshop style. Don't just, make it interactive. Really work with your instructors, work with people. Nobody just wants to sit and listen to a panel for 45 minutes or an hour and 15. Just answering the same questions over and over and over again for any industry. Doesn't matter. Try to really think about how long can you sit and listen to people and absorb. Yeah. Design it that way, because now we all have the patience of a nap.
Yep.
That's so true. I had that before, and now it's even worse.
Same.
We've already really kind of touched on this, but our kind of next segment of conversation per se was like, how does an organizer need to kind of shift their mindset? And I know you touched a lot upon the educational piece, which is great. And thank you for sharing that with us, because I assumed that the way that we did shows was similar everywhere with regards to that educational component being baked into the overall show. So that's really interesting that's actually kind of a forward thinking situation that's not necessarily practiced all around the world, but it's gaining popularity. So there's that. But beyond that, like other ways that organizers are kind of rethinking the way that they either go to market or that they're rolling these shows out. Can you kind of shine a light on that for us a little bit?
I think, let's talk about sponsorships and activations, right? I went to South by Southwest after COVID. I went to multi-million-dollar activations. When I walked out, I could not remember who the company was or what they did.
or what they were trying to say. Like, what was the connection?
I have no idea. I mean, I know what the Porsche did. Cars. I mean, that was easy. I also used to drive them, so that was my little mental thing. But it's one of those things where, with an activation, make it meaningful. If you're doing sponsorships, the whole ABC, gold, silver, platinum, get rid of them. Get rid of them. Have consultative conversations with your exhibitors and talk about what is it that they want. Or do they want thought leadership? So they want to have somebody on stage. Don't let that be an infomercial. And sometimes the top person who wants to be on stage is the worst speaker that they could possibly have. You got to learn how to work with that. You got to massage the egos. What can you do? Or can they bring 5 clients to meet the keynote speaker if you have a keynote, if you're still doing that antiquated thing of having a keynote? What is it that you can do? Do they want one-on-one meetings? In a perfect world, what would their sponsorship gain them? And then shush, let them tell you. Let them tell you. Banners. Why? What's the point? We're here. Okay, well, that's great. But what does it do? Is there any call to action on the banner? Probably not. So what you really want to do is rethink your activations and your sponsorships and your show floor. How can we maximize, and how can we help our clients meet the people that they most want to meet? The technology is out there, and it's getting better and better. If you're not investing in that technology, you're not going to be around, because people want to meet. We have a whole younger generation who are not going to walk up and down the aisles and just look at stuff like we all did. They want to be engaged. They've already had a plan before they walked in. They know who they want to see. Are you going to break into that clutter, or how are you going to entice them to come and see the other clients that they have? So the technology is there. You need to invest in it. And if you say it's not in the budget, you need to figure it out. But I think, again, it's speaking with your clients. Find out what is their goal. They may not want a bunch of stuff that would actually cost you money. They want something else that maybe, you can make a nice profit from. But I think really engaging with your clients and being consultative in that approach is huge. Also showing your exhibitors, make it free for people to get leads. That the software, the apps, Reed is doing a lot of work with that. They've got their own. I think Marion may be making their own as well. Give exhibitors dashboards to do the stuff ahead of time, to reach out to people. I think with, GDPR, we want to be compliant. We don't want to bomb everybody. Yes, everybody says they want to meet the president of, but is the company that wants to meet the president of Walmart or a buyer from Walmart, can they actually provide stuff in that quantity for that price? Maybe not. So we have to work with our exhibitors to say, I know this is your wish list, but let's really talk about what you can actually provide and do well with and make a client for life. So I think, we have to look at things a little differently, and there's a lot of work that goes into that, but the technology is there and it's getting better every day.
Right.
Excuse me.
The questions we had laid out are so intertwined. As you're talking about one thing, I keep thinking about something else, and I will continue to go back to Money 2020, because that's one of the, I have been there a few times, but I really love the format that they've created and how they kind of push the boundaries of what a show is and how it functions and so forth. And one of the areas that I know they have is kind of the speed dating kind of circle, like a big space, right? It's like there's room for, I don't know, 100 tables with 2 or 3 people at each table, and literally like every 5 minutes, like get up, you move over. So, again, the shows are rethinking things. They're putting the attendee first, put myself in their shoes. What am I here to get? What am I here to achieve? And then build pieces around that allow those things to happen, right? That's, at the end of the day, that's kind of a lot of the same things that you're saying as well.
The tech is out there. InsurTech does the same thing with the one-on-one meetings, but the speed dating is great. UFI does that. UFI, which is the Global Association for the Exhibition Industry, they do it. And you show up, give your name, and they pair you with people, and it's pretty interesting. I mean, sometimes I know the people that I'm meeting. Sometimes, a lot of times I don't, and they are interesting, and we do find commonality. But that speed dating thing, and then is it worth having a conversation later, is absolutely that. Matchmaking, absolutely, with appointment setting, having it on the show floor, keep people on the show floor. Money 2020 is visually a really fun show. It is a fabulous show. I suggest you look on YouTube and Google it, because they do some great things. One of the things they did this year, or well, in October, sorry, is they had a on the box, like on the record, off the record. So it was an area on the show floor that looked like an old boom box with neon and everything. Yep. And when you went in, depending, you were either on the record or off the record. If it was off the record, all the attendees had to give their phones back. They weren't allowed to bring in their phone. It was off the record. You know, and of course they spend a lot of money on visuals. They have they do a really fabulous job. They do podcasting on the show floor. They had an area for they had a beehive area where money was donated, and you could take pictures. A lot of Instagrammable moments. There's so many of those. As like G2E, which is the gaming show. It's here in Las Vegas. Big show, and it is like walking in on a casino on steroids. Yeah, they did a lot of that. So you know, what is it that we can do to make the atmosphere fun? You know, how creative can you be? Ask the younger people in your organizations. What have you seen that was really cool? If they went to a festival, what was something they saw that was super cool?
Right.
How can we modify that for what we do? Yeah. You know, being told the budget is no is not going to work anymore. If we're gonna maintain and bring in people and have them come back year in and year out, you know, Money 2020. You walk in, there is an entrance. Yeah. There is music playing. There is, you know, we're in show business, so we want to deliver that. We want to deliver that, and that's part of what you guys do as well. You know, Chris and Dana, right? I mean, that's part of what we're delivering is that experience. But if you can tie it into what it is that your client makes or your exhibitors make or what they do, you know, that's how you know it's a successful activation to come back full circle.
Agreed.
You know, if you can remember who the company was and what they made.
Right.
A day later, you know, 5 minutes later, a day later, a month later, you have done a good activation.
So then those dollars are worth it. Yep.
Right.
Agreed.
I went to last year. I went to, not in San Francisco, but the year prior in Boston. I went to HubSpot's Inbound, and their floor, their entire experience looks an awful lot like Money 2020, just on a smaller scale. Not that much smaller. Like, this is their own show, but they've done a tremendous job of building a floor that no one ever needs to leave. Keynotes over here, activations are all throughout. The stages are everywhere. And then the little, you know, the brand experience locations, the booths, which are primarily more turnkey kind of stuff, but they're all intersprinkled all throughout. So other than going outside for, you know, the food trucks, like, people are just literally mingling around the entire time. There's no situation. And I guess maybe this is the downside of having education classes that have specific times connected to your event, where the trade show floor is busy from 12 to, you know, 2, and then everybody leaves because they're all going into the sessions, and then they come back at 4 for the happy hour. I mean, there's good and bad there, but you know, again, rethinking how that all works to keep people not only on the floor but engaged and having fun and enjoying and bouncing around, doing all these different things.
EMS is like that. Event Marketers Summit, their show, it's very much like that as well. It feels big and small at the same time, because everything in is one large space, and the speaking sessions are in the room, kind of in the back, and they try to make them a little bit private and make it so you can still hear it. But the nice thing about, other than I just loved all the creativity that was around and all of the interactives, everything was very purposeful. Like you were saying, Stephanie, like, if you go and have an interactive, make sure it ties into what you do or what service that you sell, so that it makes sense. It's part of the story and makes it memorable, right? And it's entertaining. So it grabs people's attention. Because I have the attention span of a toddler. Like, I've always been like that, and now it's only getting worse, right? So, because everything is so quick, just like, you know, they think you can get a booth in a 20 by 20 new build in 2 seconds because they click on Amazon. It's like, no, it doesn't work that way. But that was a show that
buy a booth. Click.
does it really well, kind of like the inbound and the EMS. They're small enough that everything can be in that one space. So you feel like a community, whether you're interacting with a traditional exhibit experience or you're learning from one of the sessions.
Yeah.
Truly.
Hey, I want to jump in because we got
Very dry here in Las Vegas. Sorry, folks.
Yes, it's all good. We got our video and audio is not necessarily lining up, but hopefully everybody's enjoying. We got so much activity in the chat here. So Mark also asks, big discussion on LinkedIn was bathroom sponsorship and how that was done. So I've seen a few different applications of that. I know Liz from Ichi shared something. I saw some things at Photonics West where it wasn't so much a full bathroom sponsorship, but there was really kind of kitschy signs over the men's urinal. But, does size really matter? So, I mean, know who you're talking to and where you're at, so that was kind of amusing. But we've got about 10 minutes left. So real quick on that, any thoughts on bathroom sponsorship? I think it used to be a little bit of a faux pas, but is it something people are leaning into now?
Oh, my God. PCMA, Montreal, took over the women's bathroom, the main one. They brought in flowers. They brought in music. They brought in smells. They did a great job. Phenomenal job, because most of the people that go to that show are women. Mm-hmm. So that's where they branded it.
Know your audience. Exactly. Perfect.
NAM used to have a sponsorship for the men's urinals as well.
Mm-hmm.
Screens. And So, you have a captive audience, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
My mom always used to say, you can sell any spot on a show floor, right? Okay. And she would say, if you're near the restrooms, get people on the way out.
Yeah.
Not on the way in. Get them on the way in. A whole lot more patience.
Exactly.
But absolutely. Nothing. If you do it right, you do it. Some people may get offended, but kitschy's okay. Is it memorable? Does it relate to what your audience, what your product does? But absolutely, I think that, the more creative you can be and sell, why not?
Yeah. I got to tell you, things that are clever, that are witty, like live in my brain rent free when I see them. Like, I love it. Right. So that they can tie it into who they are, what they do, and communicate to me quickly something that surprises me. I'm in. Like, I pay attention to it. I notice it. I laugh to myself. Love it all day long.
Absolutely.
Right on. All right, we got a few minutes left. Dana, why don't we move over to the wisdom for next generation? And again, I know that's near and dear to you based on your involvement with the future workforce. But Stephanie and Dana, why don't we chop it up a little bit around, like, what would you tell your former self, or as new people are coming into the industry? Like, we've all got over 30 years of experience apiece, right? That's almost 100 years of experience in general. Like, what's the message that we're going to put out there to these kids who are just getting involved now?
Yeah.
Well, I do teaching at universities. I do some guest teaching at universities here in Las Vegas, UNLV.
Okay.
I've done teaching there. I've done teaching at the junior college, and their speech and debate, their speech department and their communications department. So first of all, we don't tell people how much fun our industry is. We are terrible at marketing ourselves. We have a really fun industry. Yes, you're working long hours, but you know what? No day is the same. And there's a certain kind of person that thrives off of no day being the same. It's not for everybody. Right? We've all met people who are in it for one show and gone, or they're in it for life.
Yeah.
And it
Agreed.
your level to CEOs that could retire, and they're coming back in because they love it. They absolutely love it. So that's one of the things that we do. The other thing is that we're a team. Everybody putting on the show is a team. I remember working on a show, and they had a younger, I don't know, the people working on the show, the more junior people or mid-management. They said, well, the exhibitor office. I said, why is your door not open? They're like, because it's for us. I said, that's called a staff office. If we're here, the door is open for exhibitors. Could somebody leave, when I was doing shows in Mexico and we would build from the ground up and it was hardwall, I would just have my office would be built first on the show floor, and everybody working, that were coming in, the freight forwarders to, the folks putting together registration, whatever it was. Here, just put your stuff in my office, and here's some, there's some, I brought some cigarette bars and some other stuff. Help yourself. Like, it's a team. We don't work in a vacuum. Treat everybody with respect, because these are the people that are making you look good and making you look bad. And that includes your union folks. It includes everybody. It takes a village to build a city. And if you think about what we do, we create a city that exists for 2, 3, 4, 5 days, goes away, never to be the same again, ever the same again. So, enjoy that process, and understand that, and after a show, when people haven't done it for a long time, there's an emotional attachment. It's like the bride, right? After planning all the time for the wedding, and then the wedding's over, then there's a huge letdown. It's an emotional experience. Address it with your team. Definitely address it. So I think, doing that was something.
Uh-oh. It's just us again.
Well, there we go. She'll be back. I have faith. There she is. She was here. Now she's over here.
But I think, advice to my younger self is a little more patience. A little more patience. I think that's for all of us. We want change to happen now.
Yeah.
But I think that the biggest thing for younger people is that don't pigeonhole yourself. If you're enjoying the industry, but you don't like your job particularly, there's a lot of other jobs out there. There's a lot of other roles that you can do and be successful. Not everybody wants to be the president of a company. They're perfectly happy where they are. Allow that. Celebrate it. Celebrate longevity.
Absolutely.
Also, don't be afraid of change. Just because we used to do stuff all the time doesn't mean we need to. So don't be afraid of change.
Yep.
And as you get entrenched in the business, sometimes we forget that lens of when we were new and saw it differently.
Yeah. Before I joined Blue Hive, which 21 years ago now, I was contemplating a change. Do I change industries? Do I look for something a little differently? And a wise friend of mine, also in the business, said, don't take for granted how fun this industry is. And you're not going to find that elsewhere. You're going to go work for some other agency, even if it's like a creative agency or something like that. It's just different. Like, don't take it for granted how fun this is. And you're absolutely right. We have to do a better job of marketing that to bring people in who are looking for that kind of environment. Yes, stressful, but also really fun, really rewarding to see bare concrete one day and 3 days later you built this thing. Like, how freaking cool is that? Like, I get so much juice from that.
Well, I think we all still do.
Yeah,
I think we all still do. Or if you're doing an event, same thing. You're working. It's a conference. It's everything else. It's fantastic when you see people connecting and forming relationships, and you've helped in that process.
Yeah.
Wow.
I did this. Partially responsible for that. Right on. All right. Well, listen, this has been such a cool conversation, Stephanie. We can't thank you enough for coming on board.
Having me.
There's been some technical glitches, but I mean, this is the event industry, and we just kind of roll with it, right? This is how it goes. So before you go, two things. One is, and I know we keep putting your LinkedIn connection up there, but if people want to reach out, is that the best way to get a hold of you, through LinkedIn? Or
LinkedIn is great. On the Instagram, I always forget to go on, but I'm at Steph Selesnick, and I'm one because I got hacked, and Instagram has no humans to talk to when that happens. And on the X, on the old Twitter, Steph Selesnick. But LinkedIn is the best way. You can also catch me on Exhibition World, and then I have my own newsletter called The Global Glimpse. And you can follow me there as well. I put out stuff about once a month-ish. I should probably be a little more consistent, but once a month-ish, depending on what it is. And I love to connect. I llove our business. I love meeting people.
Awesome.
And this has been a blast.
Excellent. So on the toolbox here, we like to help people sharpen their tools and or put a new tool in their toolbox. So if you could leave our guests and folks who are going to listen to this podcast in the future with maybe one or two little nuggets, is it something we've already said, you want to come back to it, or something maybe we didn't get a chance to say? What do you have as a little golden nugget exit prize for us?
Okay, number one, if you've had the same floor plan year after year after year, change it. Change it. Mix it up. Don't wait till you move cities. It's boring for the attendees. Think about the attendee experience. It's boring. Move things back. Some friends that have the gear and something else show, I wrote about it for Exhibition World, and I just spaced on the name. They talk to all of their exhibitors, their big exhibitors, and move them to the back of the hall and put all the small companies in front to change, because everybody was going to go see the big guys anyway. And it changed the entire floor plan and feel of the show. So seriously, really re-examine breaking it up. I know we've spent years getting people involved and loving their real estate. We have to stop doing that. We have to change it up. You want to have exploration and discovery as part of your expo. And then the other trend that I think is going to stick, and we need to figure it out, is one-on-one meetings. Attendee to attendee and attendee to exhibitor. And like speed dating, all of these different things. Take advantage of it, take advantage of the technology and what's out there, and make it worthwhile for everybody to be there.
Love it.
Awesome. There you go. We got gold nuggets here right at the end. That's why it's important to stay the entire show through and just get the stuff.
Thank you all for whoever tuned in. And if you're looking at it on post, thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. We had a great day in the chat. So Dana, we're going to start advertising this show as a great place to come and network and meet people in the chat. So Zadia, Eric, Erica, Jay, Mark, these guys were super active today, chit-chatting up, and I hope you guys have connected, and Kate, and you know, taking it to an all new level. So thanks everybody for being really active there. Great to see a lot of banter happening there, and you guys connecting, you know, one-on-one. Again, this is what we've done, right? We're one to many and one-on-one. We're helping to pull it all together. We're facilitating that here on the Toolbox. All right, we're wrapping it up. Thank you everybody for attending. This is going to go out as a podcast. It's on all of your favorite podcast areas, and it's also live here forever. Like we're going to look like this forever, which is nice. And on YouTube, LinkedIn, YouTube video, and then on all the podcast channels. So say thank you and goodbye, and everybody happy eventing, and have a great weekend. Cheers.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.